Welcome to the Same Day Podcast, where we discuss driving incremental business growth and other topics related to real estate, property management, and entrepreneurship. Now to the show at hand.
Matt Zalk here. I'm the host of the Same Day Podcast, where I connect with top business experts and real estate leaders. A couple of past guests that we've had on the podcast that might be interesting to you. Mike Bosch of Atento Capital is doing some great stuff in both Tulsa and the Northwest Arkansas area, helping to promote, general growth of business and some fun employment stuff, along with the growth and seeding of new businesses. We've also had Chip Gavarino of Topeka Coffee and a bunch of other restaurants and some fun commercial real estate downtown Tulsa that was on recently. Great podcast if you want to go back and listen to them. Today's episode is brought to you by Keyrenter Property Management. At Keyrenter Property Management, we're a full-service property management company helping our clients buy, renovate, and operate real estate assets. We help our clients build wealth while taking the headache out of property management. Listen, Devin, you don't quite know this, but we do a lot of renovation work for underserved communities, specific like geographic communities. I shouldn't say communities like people necessarily, although we do work with a ton of folks through Catholic Charities and the synagogue, helping to place the Afghan refugees, the Burmese refugees, the Rohingya, etc. So that's also fun. But Mike Bosch is a good case example. He did a great deal. He bought a threeplex for $25,000, added $100,000 in renovation with Keyrenter, and brought rents to $2,200 a month in total. That's quality workforce housing, 3 units, $2,200, like $600 to $800 a unit. And we revitalized a boarded up, blighted house, and he's got a solid return to boot. So it was fun doing that project with him, and I think he's excited about the overall return on that. That is why no matter what rental you have, single family homes, condos, townhomes, apartments, we have the management solutions that you need. Go to KeyrenterPMC.com or info@KeyrenterPMC.com. Our guest today, Devin Howland, was introduced to me by Aaron Miller of in Tulsa, who's doing some fun economic development work. Actually, he's helping recruit in Tulsa for companies that are looking to hire folks in the technology space, generally that are not here in Tulsa and might be interested in coming here, for companies that Mike Bosch is seeding oftentimes that have significant recruitment needs in the technology space and other spaces. Devin is the Economic Vitality Director for the City of Fayetteville, Arkansas, one of the fastest growing and consistently named best places to live in the country. That is impressive. And we spend a lot of time in Fayetteville, and it is an awesome place. Northwest Arkansas is great. Devin's passions include economic mobility and equity through workforce training and urban development. He's also a certified economic developer with the International Economic Development Council. Devin, thank you for being on today.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
So Aaron introduced us, and he was telling me you're doing some great things in Fayetteville. He put it in the context generally of there's a lack of housing, generally speaking, in Fayetteville. There's a lack of affordable housing specific, maybe not lack of housing. You can tell us about that, but lack of affordable housing specifically. I guess my question to you do you have a sense of what the actual lack is at this point of affordable housing in Fayetteville?
Oh, well, affordable is a relative term, and it depends on who you ask. And, that's something that we grapple with. And even the definition of workforce housing, there's not an agreed upon term. And so we stick with what HUD's is, and I believe that's 30% of AMI. Could be wrong. Correct me if you know.
We generally talk about it as, I think in Tulsa before COVID, I knew it before COVID because I was working with the city, but it was like $800 to $1,100. So that's probably a median AGI in Tulsa. Or that's probably the relative to the AGI in Tulsa.
Absolutely. And so one of the things that we're looking at is we're trying to get an accurate unit count. We've actually and we're updating our economic development master plan right now. And one of the unique aspects of Fayetteville, I've been fortunate enough, I've worked with a lot of cities. I've never worked in a place like Fayetteville. And I think it's just a testament to this administration. But if it goes into a master plan, it's going to get done. And so these documents are important. They're contentious because people know they get implemented.
Yeah. And
it's not just some whimsical wish list of actions that, wouldn't it be cool if, we just throw a bunch of 7-story buildings down a road that we want to redevelop. They influence a lot of money. They influence rezoning decisions, development entitlements, et cetera. And so housing as an economic development issue is something that is relatively new for me. Because I remember just a little personal story about some of the cost. I moved here from Little Rock, Arkansas in 2017, and I had a foreclosure that I was fortunate enough. My in-laws are commercial real estate or residential and commercial real estate investors, lots of rental properties, so very familiar with this world. And they had pointed us to a foreclosure. We made a lot of money on that house. It was a great start for our family doing that. But I sold it for $77 a foot. And I came up here and I remember sitting at the title company wanting to vomit because I signed for $204 a foot. And I actually made the newspaper and it said, this joker and his wife, Devin Howland, signed for 204 foot in downtown Fayetteville. And now comps are 400. And so it's... and looking at this, and it's even higher if you go up the road towards Bentonville, et cetera. And, and as a professional, it's this weird conundrum because personally, you're like, wow, cool. Look at all this equity I've got. And professionally, it's a nightmare just from a workforce housing standpoint and wanting the people that make this city so incredible. And that's, those are the people that are working in the service industry and the bars and the restaurants. They want to live close. And, Fayetteville has goals on being very cognizant towards climate. Well, if they have to live out in West Fork, Arkansas, which is about 30 minutes down the road, they're adding mileage in, they're adding transportation cost. It's so counterproductive. So I don't have an accurate count. We will soon. We're doing that audit and inventory. There was a massive study that the Center for Business and Economic Research just reached out. And even if you're, in Oklahoma, I would challenge you to take a look at this study about what's going on in this corridor. Home prices are up 27% compared to last year. It's $383,000 is the median price. The report talks about, and I think the author of the report, dear friend and colleague, Mervyn Jebaraj, he said it best. We are losing that competitive advantage we have on affordability. And it's going to be gone quicker than we ever thought if this keeps up. What's happening over here is utterly remarkable on the development we're seeing, but the housing cost and what it's doing here, I think it's going to keep a lot of people out. We're clearly going to see displacement. Of course, any community does see that, but how we address that as the city is something I'm really excited about and excited to talk more with you about.
So how are you addressing it?
So our first plan of attack, I don't know if you're familiar with the concept of growth nodes. And if you look at a city like Austin did this very well, but going back to the live oak you saw on my background earlier when I joined on Zoom, have you been to Savannah?
I have been to Savannah. I love Savannah.
So Savannah, they've got, I believe, 14 to 16 squares. They have these little pockets all over their city where people want to be these desirous development areas. Well, in Fayetteville, people want to locate in two places, downtown and then uptown. Is our, much more heavy auto-oriented development in the northern part of the city, but we're seeing a lot of dense housing there, especially on the student and workforce side. It's much closer to the interstate than our downtown. Fayetteville has a really unique development pattern because, it's often said, and, we've had former council members say Fayetteville got rich at the wrong time. However, back then it was the right time. So we look at it, we developed along a highway, Highway 71B, not the interstate corridor. We don't have heavy development towards the interstate as like a Rogers does, a Springdale does, et cetera. Furthermore, we're further challenged by the hills. And so when you think about these places like in Austin, the Savannah, it's not just downtown. You have so many of these incredible neighborhoods. You have these little pockets and within these pockets, not only do you have services, but our City Plan 2040, our guiding land use plan, and that land use plan, for those that aren't familiar, that's what governs zoning of property. That's what governs the entitlements that you may or may not have on properties that your investment properties may be on, or your personal home even. And if you're not familiar, I would really encourage you to get familiar with your zoning codes because they dictate what you can and cannot do. And one of the things that we're trying to do is what we call growth concept-oriented development. And it's something I'm really, really excited about. But it's this idea that, we can have these pockets of density where development entitlements are higher, where goods and service accesses are within walking distance. This is where we can have transit stops, et cetera. And to do that, what can we as the government do to influence that? Well, how do we entice the private sector to follow? you hear a joke, you could just call it an arts district, and all of a sudden you're going to see investment roll down it. But we have one of those too.
Yeah.
So, but a little bit different. But one of the things that we're looking at, can we coordinate across, infrastructure? Can we coordinate across protect the land through entitlement? So when I say protect the land, I'm talking about higher entitlements. I want to give you more density because I want you to be able to build up.
Right.
Fayetteville doesn't have, Fayetteville abolished commercial parking minimums. I think we're the only city in Arkansas that has that. And there's communities across the country that have done it, not as many as one would think, but
what does that actually mean? It means when you put commercial development somewhere, you don't have to have a certain number of spots per square foot of space. Okay.
Absolutely.
Got it.
Yeah. And so, there's people that love that. There's people that dislike it. As an urban development guy that loves urban places, I love that because downtowns can't be downtowns if you had those parking requirements. Sure. And so, and it really gets into the point that, people are precious. Are we going after people or parking? So, looking at these growth nodes, our land use plan identified about a dozen of these areas, key intersections, et cetera, that had close amenities within parks or our trail systems, but it also helped us identify gaps to go, okay, how now can we entice development to come in there? And so starting with entitlements, but also from the government side, and we'll talk more about affordable housing, it beckons the question, what else can we do to control that narrative or control that market? Right. Well, we can buy land too. And if we buy the land, we can control the land.
Interesting.
We can send it out for RFPs, et cetera. And this isn't novel. Cities across the country do this, yet you mainly see it for stadiums or these bigger economic development projects. Yet you go out west and you hit the Plain States in Colorado, they do this for housing all the time. It's nothing new for them. Yet for us, land and infrastructure access and, those entitlements, when it comes to driving housing, at least in the state of Arkansas, those are the tools we have. We are very much we are sales tax dependent state, unlike a Texas. I'm not familiar, and I should be, but Oklahoma, are you heavy property or sales tax?
You know what? We have a good mix. I mean, I think I actually don't know the answer to that question, but I know we pay a lot of property tax, but we're certainly not as bad as Texas. Texas is a heavy property tax state. And how would you actually determine that? We pay, oh boy, I don't even know how much we pay, what the millage rates would be on property tax. I mean, it's never been an issue for us when we think about investing in low-income housing, or when we focus, it's never really been an issue, but I know we pay, 8 or 9% sales tax. And we do pay hefty, vis-a-vis Colorado, for example, we pay huge property taxes, but I don't think we're nearly as high as Texas.
Yeah, we have an extremely low property tax rate. It's almost laughable when you look at it. And there's other laws that have cuffed these. There's state laws that have cuffed what that property tax can and cannot be used for.
And why originally did they do that? Why did they limit the overall property taxes? It's not like in California where you have to do it so people can't. It's like unaffordable to move once you move because you have to pay crazy property taxes, or your house has gone up 600 times in value, and you can't live there anymore because of property tax. Or is that the case?
In Arkansas, I think the tax structure. This is a very conservative state, and you've seen that over. Fayetteville is a very progressive community. I often like to joke that we're a blueberry and a tomato patch, and that is so true. It's not a bad thing. It's I live here for a reason. I work for this place for a reason, but. You look at when you have that, though, you have low property taxes, and our sales tax rate's 9.75%. I think it just kicked up to 10.25%. Wow. And so people get shocked when they see that. Yet when you do the math and you balance it across to Texas, it comes out really close when you think about cost of living, et cetera, where when I get to that, though, sales tax driven, we can't run TIFs in Arkansas.
Right.
Tax increment financing is a huge tool that, my colleagues in nearly every other state can use. They're illegal in Arkansas.
They're illegal.
Correct.
Why is that? The state legislature just said basically we don't want to be giving tax revenue away, or we don't want to be withholding it.
Long story short, some were tried here. It didn't work, and they backfired and failed. And the state legislature said, no more.
So you're really limited in the tools that you can use for promoting economic development.
Well, for housing, it's about housing mainly. The economic development tool list. Now, if we're getting into employment, That's a long list, and we've got a whole book. I can do tax rebate incentive, or I can do income rebates. I can do stuff all day long. I can run pilot bonds. I can run. Oh, there's the it's there's a huge plethora of opportunity or tools there. But for housing,
on the
there's
housing.
not.
Yeah.
No.
Interesting.
And I think I hope that, and I think there's good groups that are lobbying for those changes at the state legislature side, because this is a new issue. And, Arkansas, I can't remember a time, at least in my life, that we've seen a housing issue or housing escalation of this. Benton and Washington County, this is new for Arkansas, what we're seeing. And I think that you'll see more lobbying to the legislature to make those changes where we can have access to those tools, because urban development, yes, we're not heavy property tax driven, but when we increase density, we're increasing revenue through sales tax, especially because we have internet sales tax here in Arkansas now.
Yeah. So
if you end up buying on every bed,
if you end up buying that, like buying a parcel of land, then you can actually control somehow through land use restrictions the development that goes in there for housing, and what portion of the housing needs to go for 50% AGI or 40% AGI.
You can take it a little further than that. As the owner of the land, it gives lots of opportunities, and there's a great example of one that I saw in Michigan that was done where the municipality held a key parking lot, and it was a couple acres in the core of their downtown. We have lots of these. And they knew they needed housing, and they also knew they needed an office. And so they were able to do a request for proposals, and they put that out, and the development community just swirled in, made those applications. But they had stated in that RFP, we want at least 500 units. We want half of them have to be X amount of affordability. And how do you leverage that? Well, the carrot's the property in that situation, or other incentive structures that they may have. And so for us, in looking at it in an Arkansas-based scenario, it's land. This is not new. We have a ton of land that we as the city own in our commerce district. I sell that land at $20,000 an acre, which is very low for up here, but I control it, so I can make sure I'm getting the employment metrics I want, the wages I want, the benefits that I want, the companies in the right mix. It's adding, this rippling effect in the sector. So that, that conversation's been had of, okay, we're doing this with companies already. Why not do it with housing? So that is.
Are there any good examples of restricted property that you've sold that have actually turned into nice multifamily development, or I shouldn't say nice is a relative term, but like into high unit mixed use, or just significant numbers of multifamily developments that you're proud of?
That I've been involved in? No. All of mine have been employment based and heavy employment based side. But this push now on, this cry, not the cry, well, it is a cry, and this is a new issue. This issue of housing, I think it's really beckoning it on doing that. Now, there's great examples where we have seen public in regards to, public housing trusts and authorities that have bought property and done that. But a city stepping in and doing that, it would be a first time. We're also working on several other public-private partnerships right now that I can't get into in our downtown core that I'm excited about, that I hope keep setting the tone for pushing these conversations forward. But
is everything pushing like high density housing, or some of it, big farms that are being converted into single family residences?
Yeah, great question. I'm glad you asked it. Fayetteville has established a growth boundary because one of the things that we look at is we can't keep running infrastructure. So many developments don't pay for themselves. It's our job to manage taxpayer money, just as it is, you have to manage your client properties. If I'm not doing a good job and we're running it at a loss, we're doing a disservice to the public. Right. And so the administration of Mayor Jordan's have set a growth boundary here, and it's a box. It's called the Mayor's Box, and it is a 4-lane arterial that runs around the city. We don't run pipes outside of it. We don't want to do cost shares outside of it. We want to backfill in because that's where our infrastructure network is. And so, however, like any community, the challenges that we're having here is people don't like change. That's normal. That's a normal part of life. Yet we're going to grow. We're either really going to like the outcome or we're not. And, I think again, too, we got to make our table bigger. And that's really what we're focusing on now. And so we will you do see increased density across the city in regards to that, but we still have RSF4 pockets that exist inside of that. And there's still pushback that we get experienced when somebody even wants to take a piece of property and goes to residential single family 8 units per acre. And you're like, oh my gosh, cluster housing, or renters, or oh my. And so that is, it's unfortunate to hear, but that's not a Fayetteville thing. That's an every city thing that has that, especially out in California.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And I think a key part of that is that's a separate podcast, and I would need to be off the clock when I did that interview or want to be. But that's a separate challenge.
But I mean, I'm reading this article that was published in talkbusiness.net, and I just saw it there, but you mentioned it earlier. The first 6 months of 2022, there's a 27% jump in housing prices from $308,000 in 2021 to $384,000. You said three, so somewhere $383,000 or so in 2022, the first 6 months of 2022. I mean, that's well above it's below the national average, which I think is something like 414 or something like that, but it's well above the national average for first-time home buyers. Of course, the statistics from the Real Estate Authority came out and said the average first-time home buyer is now 33 in the United States, which is the highest it's ever been. And I think the average housing price for first-time home buyers is something like $250 or so. So that's, 383 to 250 is a massive, massive jump. So there has to be something. I paid
$109 when I bought my first home. So
it's jumped in such a huge way. And I think, single family, not everybody's going to want to live in apartments, right? I mean, it's a great option. It's great for density. It's great for infrastructure. And it's great for revenue from tax collection if you're doing the internet tax. Certainly, but then there needs to be something on the single family resident side that helps drive down that price a little bit or keeps it flat at some level.
Absolutely. And, and again, too, I hate to sound cliche, but again, it's simple economics at the end of the day on demand. I'm fortunate enough, I live, and, for your listeners out there, if you look up South Street Cottages and you look up that website, that's where I live. I live in downtown. I can walk to downtown. I'm in a single family home, but I'm about 10 feet from my neighbor.
Wow.
And I absolutely love it. I've got big dogs. We have a yard, but I can walk everywhere I need to go. And it was a big adjustment for me, but it really helped us reevaluate our priorities. But it also showed me that there are other models that, to increase this density, because I wasn't familiar with it. This wasn't something I had to work on before I came to Northwest Arkansas. I wouldn't have called that single family, but it is. Yeah. And we've got lots of different, and the people that are drawn to these more dense types of development, it's not just youth, it's also the elderly. And you're seeing people like that are going into this because guess what? I don't have to mow a lawn. And that is an amazing thing. And I used to take great pride in my diagonal mowed lawn in Little Rock. And so, you look at that though, but in the same right, we put walking and we put walkability above that. And that the only regret, I have of living in such a type of home is that I didn't buy 2 or 3 now looking back. And so there are typologies of increasing density, but that's a big part of it. And, I want to touch on something else you talked about, especially with rental properties. You have duplexes, you have triplexes and quadplexes. You get to Chicago and you've got 6plexes and 8plexes. Yep. So often, the opposition or the discomfort that we hear towards these rental units, I think people should take a walk through their historic district. And they should look closely and really closely. And I want you to go duplex hunting and look for an A and a B on that building. And you see some of these beautiful historic homes that you can't tell. And, often with visual preference surveys, you can really change, or you can at least, equip somebody to realize that, what their perception of a rental unit is not always the case. Some are absolutely stunning and they're blended in and they're hidden. And these historic districts have that. And so, again, this isn't a new issue. This isn't a new problem. The era of suburban sprawling development of these big neighborhoods running out, it's the shortest experiment in human history that we've done. And so, especially if we go overseas and look at the development patterns of Europe, et cetera, Canada, this isn't new. We've done this before. It's just, it's time to make like I'm going to keep saying, it's time to make our table bigger.
The housing issue is real across the country. There is, I mean, all over Colorado, where you have these very high priced communities in Vail and Eagle County and Aspen and all around. There's a significant push by communities to make more housing affordable. Is there anything that they're doing out? I mean, call it Colorado, Utah. Is there anything that they're doing in those communities that's kind of pushing the boundaries, that's cutting edge, that you can pull back to Fayetteville and make work there?
Well, one of the things that I'm envious of that a lot in Colorado, and I was actually just out there. And it's funny you bring up the housing cost there because we stayed at a friend's house in Lakewood, and this beautiful neighborhood. Now, was it walkable? Sure. Was it a suburban development? Yes, it was. But $500 a foot, and I just, ooh, are you kidding me?
And that's reasonable for some parts of Denver, and it's, I mean, certainly reasonable for Vail.
Oh, right.
Or if you're working a service job in Vail or in Aspen, that is a you can't get anything for $500, but B, at $500, it's impossible to live.
Absolutely. And as you're seeing lots of stuff step in over there, and Colorado operates on a much different system than we do. Their TIF laws, it's actually sad. Some of the developments that I've seen, you'll see communities fight each other to bring a Costco across a line, and that's not what that program should be for. Yet what you're seeing too is you're seeing lots of utilization of density bonuses. You're seeing TIFs out the wazoo, whereas you look at Denver, it may have 20 to 50 running at the same time. I know Chicago has over 100 running at the same time. And so those tools are driving that investment. That I'm envious of those tools. Yet it gives me inspiration to at least push forward to make those changes in our state legislature, to lobby that we need to do this because our economic development future is going to depend on it.
Yeah.
Housing ties so critically to business and economic development, and what I mean by that is now, you look at why a company locates in an area. It's not the incentives and all of that. And if it is, I don't want the company. It shows they can be bought. But companies are going to follow people. And, one of the things we take a great deal of pride in is the quality of life we have here. And I know everybody says that, but I put that to challenge. Come to Fayetteville, come on over. It's different. And the investments we're so fortunate to have. There's so many philanthropies up here with the Walton Family Foundation, Tyson Family Foundation, and others that are making these incredible investments in biking and trail infrastructure and the arts. People want to live here. That's helping drive this housing need. Yet, in the same way, companies are following because the hardest find commodity right now is people. Labor force participation rates at an all-time low. Retirements are high. Birthing rates are down. Elon's not crazy. He keeps talking about this. Yeah. So, in doing that, these companies wanting to follow, I think, investing in housing and policies related to driving more housing and increasing our rental stock and increasing affordability options are integral to any municipality's economic development future, at least one that's growing at this rate. So and you say that about Denver and what they're doing on the plains, and going back to that, that's where everybody still wants to be. I mean, I go out there and visit once a year. I'd love to live there. And at least part of my life I want to try, yet I can't afford anything unless I'm on the front slope. And so I'm envious of the fact that they have those abilities, and I'm a little bit, and I'm hoping those changes are here. But again, I'd say, part of that sell is look to the South too. Texas has these tools, and that's how they're building Austin right now. And that's the only affordable units that are going down in the city of Austin is the one city governments are involved in.
Yeah,
that's a fact.
On the topic of Austin, I mean, that growth has been so fast, and it has outperformed the ability to keep up with infrastructure. I mean, is there anything you say there? There's the ring outside of which you don't want to put additional infrastructure. Fayetteville doesn't want to put additional infrastructure. How do you prevent growth that just is beyond what the city can really handle in terms of traffic and highways and everything else?
Well, it gets back into planning, and it gets into actually planning your work and sticking to the plan. And I don't mean to sound cliche there. We have an extremely strong development services, but we look at and we think about how we make our tax dollars work. I'll give you one example of the types of planning. We just had somebody come in last year, the year prior, and they scanned every inch of a roadway in the city of Fayetteville, so that we could prioritize what needed to be patched, what can last, what's going to crumble, and actually what's going to be more cost effective and how we fix. And that meant leaving some crumbling streets crumbling, because at this point, we can save others that save us money down the line.
Sure.
Those types of strategic, analytics, we apply to everything, our water and sewer infrastructure, et cetera, our roadways and trails. And as we continue to build these assets, maintenance is, often the center of the discussion. We've been gifted and we've purchased a lot of land that we've converted into mountain bike tracks. If you look up Centennial Park, that's a project I'm particularly passionate about. I helped be on the land acquisition side of that deal and purchasing that incredible mountain. Yet it was, and we were fortunate to do so through a gift, yet you've got to think about maintenance in this and how do you pay for that going forward? And managing on the highways, one of the things, actually, it's funny, we have a couple highways running through Fayetteville, but one we actually just took from the state, and that is College Avenue, Highway 71B, was the main thoroughfare through our community. And we wanted to do more with it. And we actually recognized that we could stack increased density, actually make this a walkable corridor and actually dangle a carrot. Yet to do that, we needed to own roads. So we actually took it from the state. And they're happy to do that when you do it, and actually comes with a little bit of change because it takes them off of their maintenance list. We run bonds. We just ran a $230 million bond. Transportation was the largest side of that. And what was unique about that bond campaign, and I've never seen this done. And if your listeners aren't familiar, municipalities will push really big bonds to cover infrastructure projects that they need, and they'll pay that bond off over a 5, 10, 15, 20-year period, whatever the note is. Our administration did something, and I think it was a real testament to, the residents here. We threw a bond down with 10 separate questions on 10 different amounts in total. If they only voted 2, we were only getting 2. And we ended up voting in all 10. That took a lot of political will to do, but also took a residency that really believed in those projects because they were voting for specific things. Right. Well, and in the transportation side, addressing some of that aging infrastructure, dealing with some of those traffic issues, but you have to go to the popular ones, those ones that you have some in your town that you just make you roll your eyes. In dealing with that too, it's also planning for the future, because that doesn't necessarily mean more lanes. That's a different topic. I won't go down that rabbit hole today, but you tell me the interstate, if the solution is adding a lane, okay, let's talk about California. We just keep adding a lane. Yeah. So that to deal with that too, it goes back to housing. And I'm not just saying that because that's the topic of our conversation. If we can increase density in the undesirous areas, and we can provide that development path for developers to build the units the market wants there, well, at that point, we're not running infrastructure outside. We're not worried about that if somebody is on a transit line, et cetera. So housing drives everything, in my opinion, at this point, which is why increasing these pockets of density across the city in these key areas is so crucial. And I will say I've got one I'm excited about. I won't say its name, but we used bond funds to do a railroad crossing, and I am so tickled. We are a housing project coming forward, and it is 55 units per acre on a 39-acre tract. It'll be 2,075 units in total. Wow. It'll be, I believe it's the densest housing development in Arkansas outside of, a tower in downtown Little Rock. So we're very excited about that. And that's going to be some much needed units that'll be phased in over these next few years.
What is the actual inbound population on an annual basis or monthly basis?
We're looking at, we got our 2020 or the 2020 census came out. So I'll run that and get that number for you, but that's at about 7 folks a day. Wow. And in looking at that, and it's key before somebody says oh, wait, you have the University of Arkansas there, you're counting students. Students got to be here over 9 months to tick into the census. So I can tell you from the Texas exodus that happens as soon as the school moves out and the Great Migration back to Dallas happens. It's not all just students here. We're seeing a lot of folks from Austin. I can't tell you the number of people from Austin that I've met just at farmers markets every Saturday. Yeah. And their complaint too, though, to your point earlier, they're chasing, I think, affordability, and they're cashing in on those assets there. Yet they're looking for an quality of life, but without addressing housing, that's going to change here too.
But I figure if that's 2,000 a year in the 2020 census, it has to have gone up. I mean, Fayetteville, I think Tulsa, Oklahoma City, all these towns have been net beneficiaries of COVID. People are moving out of New York and LA. To places
you're
like
absolutely
Miami and
right.
Denver, no doubt, but also to places like Fayetteville. I mean, they see the quality of life, the affordable aspect vis-a-vis relative to those other towns. And I have to imagine it's more than 7 a day after or during COVID, at least.
Oh, you're probably absolutely right. And number two, and again, that's the problem with running on census.
Yeah.
One of the things that we can do that we're interested in looking at too is we can tap. It's the beauty of running our own water and sewers. We can tap into that data and look at that. I don't have those numbers on me. And looking at that too, the migration that you talked about, it's interesting. And I'll back in the question to you. I'm sure you've looked at it too. Are these other places seeing loss? And we're not seeing that here in the South, but
California
how
definitely is,
aggressive
right?
is that pedestrian shed out of these other states?
Yeah, I mean, I think California is definitely seeing net loss. Certainly during COVID, because I don't know. Have you been out to LA lately? It's wild. I mean, there's so much
I was in
homelessness
San Francisco
everywhere you
last
go.
year.
It's pretty bad. And all of our friends that live in LA I mean, a lot of people say if I wasn't anchored there with family and other places, I would definitely leave. A lot of people are certainly leaving because they went there for the beauty of the beaches and the weather, and they're finding it just to be a cumbersome existence, both from the affordability perspective and also with, homeless people that are digging through your trash cans at all times. And that's a testament to the lack of mental well-being and mental health institutions that have been defunded over the years. It's really, really, really sad. But fundamentally, they're moving back to our areas because they think it's a better quality of life, and they're moving from Austin as well because that's also gotten so expensive, and also the infrastructure. You have to drive half an hour. I mean, to your point of being very, very close to your work on a daily basis, that is incredible from a quality of life perspective. If you're in Boston and you have to drive an hour each way in good weather and 2 hours each way during a snowstorm, that is a huge detriment to the quality of life. And, I think towns where you can be closer, the weather is good and hot in the summer, but good generally all year round. It's just a huge, huge boon.
Man, I'm really glad you brought that up. And, this isn't a brag point, but, I am 2 minutes from my work. It takes me 2 minutes to walk into downtown or to the city hall. Did I?
Yeah.
How long's your walk?
I'm like 7 minutes, but yeah, it's still pretty good.
Well, I gotta be. My cabs are broken. Fayetteville has hills, and that's the problem. But and looking at that too, though, you think about why these populations, maybe at Tulsa, but even Northwest Arkansas, are different. You take a student from Dallas, and the northern bookend of this region is Bentonville. And Bentonville, for folks that don't know, that's where Walmart's headquarters is, growing, absolutely beautiful community. If you're not aware of the new Walmart headquarters that's being built, it's a new city just about. Check it out. It's absolutely stunning.
When does that open, by the way?
It's going to take a few years to build that. Okay. And I don't know, but they've literally amassed blocks and blocks and blocks and blocks, and they're building a city. It, has housing, it has hotels and restaurants and trails and art and but again, too, you look at Fortune 1, what are they doing? Well, they're having to compete to pull talent. Again, this all goes back to people. And so, but in looking at that, Bentonville's 30-minute drive from here. That's a grocery store trip for a Dallas transplant.
Yeah.
And so for me, I'm like, we're driving to Bentonville tonight. But I have to remember too, especially from an economic development side, when I think about, what tax dollars are leaving my community that I'm trying to stop, that's nothing for a lot of our new residents to drive up there just to even go get the Trader Joe's they want. Yeah. We don't have a Trader Joe's in Bentonville. But anyway, you know what I mean.
Yeah. That's so funny. I mean, we talk about Tulsa. I mean, if it's more than 15 minutes, I'm just not going. There's just almost no way. I might have to go for work at some point, but generally speaking, on a Tuesday night, if we want to go for dinner, I'm definitely not going more than 10 or 15 minutes. That's a stretch. Devin, it's been so great to chat with you. I really appreciate your perspective on economic development, on the housing issues that many of our communities are facing. Where can people reach you if they want to know more, if they want to contribute, if they want to just generally understand more about what you're doing?
Absolutely. A couple different ways. I'm active on LinkedIn, Devin Howland, Director of Economic Vitality for the City of Fayetteville. You're also welcome to reach out to me on my work email, dhowland, HOWLAND, @fayetteville-ar.gov.
I love it. Devin Howland's Economic Vitality Director for the City of Fayetteville in Arkansas. Again, one of the fastest growing and consistently named best places to live in the country. Super exciting. Devin, thank you for being on here. We really appreciate you.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate you. Have a great one.
Thanks for listening to the Same Day Podcast. Tune in to a new show each week and be sure to subscribe to get future episodes.